merhabalar, hoş geldiniz. Türkçe yapıyormuşum.
Hello everybody, welcome. I'm going to conduct it in Turkish, but if anybody wants English, I can turn back to English, but there are going to be many English terms. So, because, it is fine, but the situation, the terms are in English. So I'm going to talk about game study design. Some of you are my students, as we said. There are actually three versions of these presentation. There are different versions that I've developed as well. So in general, I talk about the theme of culture, and I would like to try to talk about it right here. As we know, I am in Bahçeşehir University Digital Game Design Department, which is also called BUG, and I've been an editor in a magazine since 2007, and I'm the Turkish editor for another publication. And there are books that I also published, and I can show you at the end of the presentation. I've been in the industry for a long time. I also very much care about comic books, and we are translating it into Turkish, and I'm working as an editor. I have a comic book class as well, thanks to Güven. They also supported me for that. I have started giving game journalism, philosophy for games and culture, and actually what I'm working for is culture. So defining this industry, defining the identity of the industry through culture, it goes all around. And just coming from the discussions within that culture lesson, we have also created a philosophy class from that. And what I'm going to talk about, and finally what I'm going to reach for, is culture. Culture is very difficult. This is a presentation type. This is not usually how I talk about it in the class, but when we try to define culture, there are many answers, because culture is constantly changing and evolving and changing forms. You can never find one definition of culture, and this is great. I wouldn't want something defined with a capital T as a truth. So at that point, it will stop discussion. So it is against what academics stand for. It will stop different theories, different ideas. So academy constantly tries to develop ideas, and a rigid definition is against that. And I will always say that semiotics are very important, and definitions and roots of the words, where a word comes from, is very important, because what kind of a change a word goes through, you may not be able to realize that, especially in English. Some words are falling out of usage. Some words have different understandings, meanings, connotations. So whenever we see a word, we would need to understand it. And culture actually comes from cultivate. It gathers and combines, it farms this. It is continuously improving and developing. Of course, I would like to, it is very hard to define what culture is, and I think you can see the presentation. If you are interested in that, you would go on a journey, and this is very complex and confusing. These are things that are, for example, a code from 58 thinks very differently to the 59 to 2007, for example. And in 73, there are different definitions, 11 different definitions. So our job is understanding gaming culture, we have to understand where we are, what are we defining, what are we generating and producing. Now, quickly, I would like to ask a question for the game culture. Of course, culture is an umbrella term, but under this umbrella, there are many sub-definitions. And first of all, the first generic one is what I've defined right here, some cultural themes. And you would think which one is the one that encompasses the gaming culture. If you have listened to my speech, maybe you would have known my answer, but if you haven't heard me talk before, you can maybe give an answer. Art? No. Yes, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about that. It could be, you know. Yes. Tradition, maybe. It doesn't seem like. Yes. Game is a subculture, and what we call it is it is a subculture. It is usually hard to define, as there is a different subculture speak is an article, and it is not that. What we call a subculture is having a high degree of cultural development and consumption, but it is not in the main culture. Gaming culture is still a subculture, even though it is reaching the popular culture in some areas. It is still considered a subculture. Whatever we do currently, for example, mobile games are extremely popular. And the fact that these are popular doesn't mean gaming culture is popular. For example, from comic books, in 40s and 50s, comic books would sell millions. About 10% of the US population would purchase that. Now we think comic books are selling great right now, but that is not the case. Currently, Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, is popular because comics are a subculture as well. There are 330 million people in the United States. If you take a look at 50s and 40s, they've had more comic book sales. But that culture is still going forward. And when we could call comic books popular culture, but currently we cannot. We can call MCU a popular culture, a piece of popular culture. So games are currently subculture, and it will continue to be a subculture because it is too big. And to be able to understand why it is a subculture, maybe, for example, we have joked with Serkan and what we are going to talk with Serkan and Güven, there's a big separation. There's a common language, for example. The language use is very important for subcultures. The way they use is the consumption in that area, for example. That is where it's going. That gamer identity is the important part, and that starts with consumption and who's consumed what. Of course, as Turkey, we are in a very different place. In the Europe, it is different. In the Americas, it is different. So digital games are actually an American culture, and we are using a comparator culture. We are seeing the transformation that has started in the 90s, and this is an area that started back then. And one of the most important person for that is this person who, if you are going to say that you're a game designer, you should read this. And there's a great Turkish translation, and it starts with Huzinga. I have also talked about Huizinga is very old school right now, but they opened the door. They defined Homo Ludens, the one who plays. And this person talks about that thinking person, walking person, and playing person. That is the definition. I said the English translations are great, Turkish translation is great, but this version is what I suggest, or what I recommend to you all. And this is the first page right here. the play is older than culture is what he's saying. And this is, we are talking about the verb play. Of course, we are not talking about games, we are talking about the verbs. I think, the play is that when we translate it to Turkish, unfortunately, it is very difficult, but in Turkish, it is different. In the terminology sometimes do not translate pretty well. For example, playfulness is very different, but the state of being playful, calling a cat a play are different things. So it is very difficult to determine that. And that's why the first sentence being such an amazing sentence is very important. And it is in line. They are saying that before culture, there were play. And the first thing is the magic circle. People who have read it maybe know about it. It talks about games are a magical area, and within the rules, it creates an area, and that area is not affected by outside factors. This is, of course, we create mods and patches and DLCs. Maybe that idea, of course, is not in line with the digital gaming scene, but what it's trying to say is great. There's a game, there are the rules, you are either in it or are not. Of course, there are no house rules. This is the game, and when it's destroyed, the game magic is destroyed. At that point, the game is destroyed. It is not the same game. And also, for the nature of humanity, of course, it is difficult to say that it is nature, it is an interesting idea, but humans are players from birth. For example, what do kids do? Kids play with some objects. For example, we done it when we were babies as well, and you don't know what are you doing. There are no rules, but you are playing. For example, it could be different tools, or maybe little soldiers or whatever. Someone would die and whatever might be the rules, we don't know. And he talks about that. For example, take a look at cats or dogs. You will see they would be playing by themselves, they would be physically moving while playing. So playing is something in nature. And I haven't written here, and Ludus would say that Ludus is what it's called, and there is somebody with a referee, a rule book, and if it's clear, we would call it Ludus. But the area, the games without rules, is called Paidia. And it is an idea coming back from the 70s, and that is what is defining as another articles and different definitions depend on these two definitions. There are rules in some games, there are rules, there are no rules in some games. So that is the biggest definition separation. And the great part is for the gaming studies, the academia is doing this right now, and well, I am seeing it in different phases as well. And in usually communication scientists has a canon, and game studies don't have one either. So this is good and bad, because to be able to support it, you don't have a main theory, but you can feed from so many different areas. You will have multiple theories. For example, there are intertheses, the interdisciplinary ideas, and the academy is extremely interdisciplinary as well. A lot of main sciences have problems. For example, as Cemil Mas said, you have to live a little to be able to jump into life. But in game studies, this is not the case, because as we know, our students realize that in the second year, you just start companies, so you jump into the industry. So I think that we realize there is a difference. So I'm also talking about the challenges and opportunities here. And games don't really have a defined definition. It doesn't have a main definition because it doesn't have a capital C truth. And that is an advantage. If we had one game, we wouldn't be here. John Carmack had created Doom in 93, and we said, all right, great. This is perfect. This is the game. And that will be the end of it. And this is not the case. This is extremely different. It is extremely developing. And starting with 2000, there's a journey that we are going through here. And in 97 and 20 to the 2003 are usually the basis of gaming, and almost all of the game genres have been created in that area. Maybe people will call MOBAs, but MOBAs are actually a sub genre of strategy games. At the end of the day, it is just simplified strategy games. And as we know, the strategy games development have been lowered a lot. The production has been losing numbers because MOBAs are taking its place. And also, Jesper Juul is very important. He has 4 books in this manner. Another important point is he have written a book called Half Real, and in 2005, it explained what is a game with a simple language, because between 97 and 2005, academia was bullshitting because there was a fighting among them. Everybody was writing something, and academics were unfortunately, creating a bunch of conflicting things. And this guy comes and creates a proper resource for us, and these are the rules for him in 2005, I think. It is, of course, great, which is created by Dan, but it shows that some basis should be created for this. And you can see this is the book, and there are 3 more books at the bottom, and all of them have different understandings. And also, Handmade Pixels is great for everybody who is creating indie games, and this is a great analysis and great ideas. And it's not entirely academics, so it is a more general language. So this will be very beneficial for all of them. Also, can I share my Instagram? I have an Instagram, and I share books and resources in that area. I will share sometimes. Sometimes we do some different interviews. If you're interested on that, you can follow my Instagram page. Ludulogy and Narratology. Now, 2 main points, as we said, ludology. Of course, it is translated as science of game in Turkish, but actually some people argue that ludology encompasses all the games, but ludology is actually the mechanics of the game. Then, in addition to that, there is narratology, the narration of the game. The area that focuses on the story that is being communicated, especially for video games. Starting from their narration, there are different points for these two things. And for example, Pong, for example, they are very limited in narration. They are giving experiences, but as narration is being included in games, some people say that a game wouldn't exist without narration, and ludologists say that if there is no code, how would you be able to game? So while these academic discussions were being held, what we see is first narration games are being created. This is, for example, the first Fahrenheit game, I think back in 2003, I think, is developed. And then we see that some people say that why I paid 700 liras for this, I just clicked the button for 3 times. So some people wouldn't see narration focused games as games. And also another breaking point was the mobile games in 2010. So the fighting between these two things are created in 2003, and in 2005 this area is included. Now, of course, for designing and explaining games, this art of game design could be a bit old, but Jesper Juul is a great person, and if you email them, they will respond, give a response. So it separates the game to 4: mechanics, story, aesthetics, and technology. These 4 pillars make a game, and we can see there's a separation between technology and story. And also for mechanics and aesthetics, he says that aesthetics should be more visible and mechanics should be less visible. For example, this is a great implemented in God of War. This is extremely very well implemented. For example, God of War has great aesthetics and great mechanics, but mechanics in the background. For example, a great game basis for that should be the formalization for a great game could be this. So you can check this book out, because understanding the game is very important. Of course, this is another book called Theory of Fun from Ralph Kostner, and he explains where a game can go for, and he's a great data gatherer as well that works on great things. And he's saying that different people has different definitions for games. For example, I prefer Sid Meier. Great. I don't know if you know about the civilization. I think personally, it is. I don't think anybody should develop games without playing a 4X strategy games. I think 4X strategy games are great. Oh, this is just a personal opinion for me, not a professional one. And Sid Meier's is a weird person. I love his ideas, and of course he acts like a rock star. Of course, for example, he called it a series of meaningful choices, because that's what he does. You know, if you ask him, that is the thing. He's creating civilization and he's still building them. And Old World, I think somebody from his team has developed Old World, and it is a new game just this month. I think it has been published. And for academics, I think in 2019 or 20, he also talked about his own memoirs for game design. And if you want to get his ideas and experiences, I would definitely recommend you this book. Of course, this is not singular. You can't define it. Everybody has their own definition, and this is the richness in gaming. Of course, also this allows hateful Reddit definitions to be created as well. And the main question comes to, you know, we are all trying to define this, and I'm talking too much. I'm sorry. What's the time? Yes. Is that the, for example, they asked for Twitter. If you have Twitter, Alena, you can reach me everywhere. I am Ertuğrul Süngü in all the social medias. I don't have a title handle like Excalibur. I don't usually use Twitter. I use Instagram more for game. I only have Instagram. Okay, I think Twitter is a weird place, so I prefer Instagram. All right, you ping me for time until I think I can go on forever. So we are formalizing the gaming and the work on gaming. This is the biggest discussion today, both for designers and consumers. The gamer is the biggest resource. Gamer and player words is something that I constantly think about because it is about identity. Now, saying the word, using the word gamer is something that people define themselves with, something like, you know, I'm a biker. You can't call them you're not a biker, come on. And I have a different idea for that. And the second point is, I want to create a heads up for example, when you say you're a biker, verification is very easy because there's an unwritten rules for that. You would either like it or not. But how biker are you is another question. You might like bikes, but how much do you like it? For example, a metalhead. What? How much of a metalhead are you? You know, you only listening to Metallica? You know, because if you are an extreme Metallica fan, then you wouldn't like extreme metal fan. You wouldn't like Metallica. So that identity is when it's defining an identity, that is the journey, because the difference is player can be anybody. It is coming from plegere in Old English, and everybody would have fun about night online because of the pronunciation. People would pronounce it as knight, but in Old English it is actually is pronounced as knight, and plegere is the root of the word. And for example, they are playing on the stage. For example, we have that word and you can see the word, but the issue is gamer. Player is not an identity. When you hold a gamepad, you can become a player. Even if you can't even manage to play the game, you can be a player because playing is an act. You are only doing that act. You are a player. It doesn't matter if you can or cannot do it. But gamer is not the case because gamer is an identity. You have to define an identity. There is no institution that is defining an identity, and we don't have any data to define a specific point where somebody becomes a gamer. So I think what's beautiful is that, but especially between generations, we can see what is the identity of gamer. For example, if you ask Serkan or Gönen, it is very clear for us. Like, for example, you are not gamers for us. And the same thing for your gamer identity might not be the same with ours. And this is also about experience. For example, some would be even more gamer, but nobody would be a more player for it because, as we said, it is about the definition of that. I can define and segregate players. I can produce for players, consume for players. I can define the market as in terms of players. For example, I study the gamer or player psychology. I have to get some data about it. So this is not about identity. This is just about your acts. Of course, academically we are defining that. By the way, this list had 30 different definitions back then. Slavic, Nordic, symphonic metal was the case. You know, there had so many genres, but there are 6 lines of different definitions, and actually the main ones are casual and hardcore players. Why did we have esport players or pro players? But since 2018, there is also the esport players or pro players, because if it's an esport players, I know that they are making money from it. This is a profession for them, and they only focus on specific games. So this is a definition. Maybe he plays 10 games, but the definition is not that. But pro player and hardcore players are very close because the differences knowing the meta of the game. Maybe you might know it or you may not know it. There are people who get bored of a game because they know a lot about the meta. So there are different needs and requirements. So because we didn't have meta before, only StarCraft had meta when we were small. You know, you would just attack and whatever. At one point, metas have been created.
So relationship of the player with the game is important. As you can see, this is not about being a gamer. So you can play this game for 38 hours. It makes you a person who plays a game for 38 hours. So academically and scientifically, it changes our perspective to the topic. So he is trying to understand and define the game, the concept of player, and also trying to understand the gamer who consumes the culture. This is how we try to get result. So there's also the phase of MMO gaming. For example, Ultima Online from 90s. Everything changed after it was released. It's something that the new business, new game model has been emerged, because there, you can take a look at new research in this MMO game design. Ultima Online changed everything, and after Ultima Online in the 90s, no MMO game has been were published in the past, and then technology improved and gameplay and the gaming design is the same. So that after that turning point, the position of the gamer has changed. So it might be a field of study for you, because at this time, the same gamer was the same, but the experience was different. And there are also reactions. By the way, when you die in the game, for example, in Online, every item of yours will be removed, because the other people, other gamers will loot you. Because we wouldn't be playing the same game in this era. So Bartel, in this regard, after designing this table, he revised this table in 2003. So it splits into 4, as you can see: killers, achievers, socializers, and explorers. He says that there are 2 models. So if the person is between interacting and world, then that person is explorer. If between interacting and player, is socializer. If world and acting between world, is achievers and killers. So, but now, we are using these different models when the table has changed and transformed into a different shape. So this is a topic that I'm working on personally. I'm trying to synthesize the 4 different concepts all together. In terms of game culture, we are seeing different topics, as you can see. So game is a subculture, but everything, as you can see in the circles, I have their own culture. The reason some are on the outside is because the second esports, for example, is something that emerged recently, mobile games as well, accessories as well, all of the topics, headlines here, have their own culture, and they have their own subculture, have their own community. So a question for you: if you are interested in one of them, I think you would be interested in others as well, at least a couple of them. Is there anyone? If one of the headlines is your hobby, yeah, you might be, if you are interested in one of them, if we encounter one of them, that you will see the other ones. You will notice that you're interested in the other ones as well. This is something that I've worked on my PhD thesis, and I hope a new Turkish publication will come soon as well. And I'm working on these all the time, new circles, new ideas, trying to identify the identity, because if we can define the identity, then we can define the field, and then we can change our perspective into the game, and our consumption habits will change. The question is, do you define Destiny and Warframe as an MMO game? Yeah, at some point, yeah, but these games do not give us some MMO experience, because we are not talking about MMO FPS in these games. That is FPS game, actually. Whether an FPS game can become an MMO, no, I think it will be a bad idea. So I have limited time, I think, yeah, all right. Let me speed up. Because normally this time is not enough for me. And so academically, what we do is this. Of course, our integral components are in Unreal Engine and Unity. When I put these pictures together, it became a yin yang, as you can see. In game designs, these two softwares are important. Unreal Engine is different from the Unity, and with the Unreal Engine 5, new promising paths have emerged. And these are the fields of topics, fields of research, and some of us are interested in these softwares as well. I've just put them for those interested. And two books, I think these two books are important and should be read. Although it's relatively old, I think it's a great book from Ernest Adams. And the book you said this would be fun I think is a great book about design. It's also an audiobook. Audiobook version is also good and very cost-effective. You should really give it a try. And new sources are as important as the old ones. Some fundamental things have not been changed, but you should take a look at this book as well. So there are many fields. There are many things that we do in design. For example, one of them is the card games. I'm really interested in card games and board games as well. So we are coming from this part. As this one is a baseball card game that was created in 1904. It was designed for gaming, but there is little information on this game. And after that, there is another baseball game that was created in 1940, but the first board game is Monopoly. So the woman called Lazy creates Monopoly, and there's a new movement, Kyrgyzstan, and she tries to get an experience on this movement. And then in 1936, Parkers came up and developed a new game. So the fact that this game is a baseball, there is a huge baseball information in the background, because this game is based in America, and the culture, sport are integrated with each other, and they're using sports for the culture hegemony. Magic the Gathering is another one. My recommendation is that for my students, you cannot create games without knowing Magic the Gathering. You might not like Magic the Gathering, but without knowing the gaming mechanisms and Magic the Gathering, you won't be able to create a game. I think it can be the best created game ever. Maybe in the top 3 for me. I've never encountered any better one. It was created by Richard, and a math professor. I really recommend you, strongly recommend you. And there are other examples as well, Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Card games, really great. And academic research on card games are little. And you need to, creating and designing card games is really interesting. After Magic the Gathering was the last one actually. After Magic the Gathering, no card games have been developed. And no single card game has been created after Magic the Gathering, that's for sure. The other ones, or similar ones, are actually the copycat of it. Board games are important because everything starts from this region. Everything starts from Mesopotamia. So it's a world coming up and emerging from this field, this area. The oldest snowboard game is from excavations in Başıhöyük. I don't know, we don't know the rules, but we know that it's a game because the other similar board games have the same actually pieces. You can find the article from a university. You can access the article, and there's also Senate. You can also take a look at them. By best game is Royal Game of Ur. You are one of the most fun games in the world. You can also download it as well, the modern version. It takes 1 minute for you to learn how to play. It's very great. So most of the game mechanism are based on these rules of the game. And there's also a rule book of this game, and interestingly, it has DLC. It was really interesting. It was really surprising for me, because also there, for those who want to play an advanced level, you can. It's just played for 3,000 years. Can you imagine? And they even did the expansion pack. Very interesting idea and information. You will like it very much. That's for sure. So I've limited time. Chaturanga. The important thing is here. I will talk about it later on. So let me talk about the board games in Turkey. There's one İhtilal from Tuncezeki Berkurt and incorporated from Can Adatepe, and neutral game called Sinners, and also Ittihad Ferman has been in a Kickstarter but didn't achieve anything. A very good game in design. Tamga, I don't know what it is, but there is. So I don't know if our graduates will come here and speak about them, but oh, is it tomorrow? All right. So Board Royal Islands from made by the graduates of Bahçeşehir University. They designed a very good game. And academically, I can suggest Euro games because all of the games in Europe. I think it's important to understand Euro games. It's about culture, and academically, there is a definition coming from Europe, and Euro games are important in terms of tangible and intangible game design elements, and elements of game design from Robert Zubek is something that I really recommend to you. And this is my book. You might have known this. I am using this game for my fundamental game design courses. It was published in 2021, and by reading this book, if you read this book, you will be able to create a board game. Also, academically, last year we made a lot of board games. Our students have made something. As you know, in the board games, there are so many squares, circles, and triangles. In Germany is a good hub for board games. There's one event, a board game event based in Germany that was organized since 2009. For example, this week's trend is using Ertuğrul item. So I think new developments will come soon they're trying to manipulate the game with the material, the changing material and the changing dynamics of the game, even the map. And I'm thinking of changing the circles. I encourage my students to do so. Some did as well. They tried to figure out to design a game based on a circle. So this one is a great example from that group. And then there's a great example, a fantastical example, by using a rotating circle. He put a lot of effort on this. He used 3D printing for this. So using a 3D rotating mechanism was a really interesting idea. And then they adapted this into a board game, a different type of board game. This team made a game that rotates in the inner circle. So the board changes every time. It's not a steady one. This was one of the most fun games. It was completely based on role play. It's both role play and board game all the time. So one of the parties becomes a thief, one of the parties become the spy. So all of them are great examples. Academically, this is all we do. So role play games, I might skip that because I don't have time. Oh, so in the field of area, in the field, there's a great opportunity. There's a great potential in Ninja Turtles, because as you can see, the right side, you can see on the right hand side, you see the real Ninja Turtles. On the left one is no, not the real ones. The first comic book of the Ninja Turtles, as you can see, it's like Blade and War. As you can see the scene when the Shredder dies, and then they have been transformed into a different shape. So it actually shows how we can get use of these game designs. This game will come in Steam. Was it released? Yeah, all right. But they didn't give me a code to play it. So it's a transmedia story in the game. You see that how the game is interwoven with many concepts, many worlds are coming together. I can tell you about it on some morning. By the way, the comic book is still going. It's an ongoing comic book because I'm still reading it. I'm skipping this. If you're interested in this one, comics and video games are a great resource and a single resource that you can find academically. It's a guide tool in which you can find any information. And cinema and video games. It's a vast array of topics. It's a separate topic. So the fairs, etc. So at the end of the day, creating the identity, the interdisciplinary formation of the game, it makes the whole game design feel interdisciplinary. Game design is a different process. So you need to play many games to initiate your process in the game design culture. So you need to understand the culture, the identity, the players. It's a great ocean. So let me end my presentation with my book recommendations. Homo Ludens, Half Real, one of the most important resources. And Routledge Companion to Video Game Studies, another one. It's a very expensive one. It's about $500, a very beneficial one. So I'm also giving courses in narratives as well. If you're interested, these 3 books are really great. All these 3 books give us information on how to use game narratives. If you are interested in role-playing games, if you want to be inside in the role-playing games mechanically, and you're interested in the historical development of them, you can use these 4 books. These 4 books are tackling with the last 10 years. And this one is about Dungeons and Dragons. In role-play game studies, a book, very, very great book, and then the other one is a creation narrative on laptop role-playing games. And another field of mine is gender. I'm also working in the gender, about queer identities and the queer perspectives on the game design. If you're interested in this one as well, Anna Tropi's book is a great start for you. But if you want to handle the game in the queer perspective, I think no matter what it is, every game designer should have received that book in terms of having an queer perspective. There is one other one from Bonnie Ruberg, already recommended as well. We're in contact with him. By the way, he's responding very fast, and he has also some online lectures. I think it will change your perception in games, not only particularly in the queer perspective, but the other perspective as well. I think it's a great academic. As there is no Turkish sources, we decided to create these sources by ourselves and my colleague in Bahçeşehir University. We created this book to game main works in Turkey. And the second work has become a series of books. The first one is the digital games, playing and meaning. And the second one will be about identity. In the second one, we will have 16 authors. It will be released on December. So the third one also will be published. We'll create a call for paper session. So we're trying to merge all of them and create a great source of materials in Turkey. If we have any article you want to be published, you can send us. So this is all. Now, by the way, lastly, a great book from Mr. Barbaros Bostan, Digital Games and Interactive Narratives. The first source in Turkey about narratives in Turkey. If you're interested in narratives, I can recommend it. So thank you very much. This is all. So I put everything down in my presentation. Sorry for that, but I'm really happy to present this. I know we are playing StarCraft, by the way. You can send us a mail because I cannot answer. I need to leave conference, sorry. And Sarkhan will come up after me. So I'm sorry, I cannot have the Q&A session. Maybe we can do it after the conference. All right, thank you.